So, if you bring home an 8-week-old Labrador Retriever, you basically have, well, roughly 28 days to fundamentally wire its brain for the rest of its life.
Yeah, it is an incredibly tight, really high-stakes window.
Right. I mean, think about it like buying a highly sophisticated piece of computer hardware. Usually, you press the power button, the screen lights up, the operating system is already preloaded, and it just knows how to connect to Wi-Fi.
It's just ready to go.
Exactly. But bringing home a puppy is like receiving a supercomputer that is completely blank.
Just zero code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hardware is incredibly powerful, but you have to write the operating system yourself from scratch based entirely on the data you input over those first few critical months.
Which is a huge responsibility, honestly.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. If you are listening to this, you are probably about to embark on that exact programming journey, or, maybe you are just fascinated by how a mammalian mind develops from a total blank slate.
And our mission today is to really unpack a highly detailed source document focused entirely on the critical early months of a Labrador Retriever's life.
Right, because we're bypassing the overwhelming and honestly often contradictory flood of internet advice. We want to extract the precise science-backed milestones and methods you actually need to know.
Because the goal isn't just surviving puppyhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
The goal laid out in the research is to intentionally raise a confident, adaptable, and structurally healthy adult dog.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core premise here is that the first few months of a puppy's life fundamentally wire the adult dog they will become.
Absolutely.
But the timeline actually starts deceptively slowly. According to the sources, for the first 2 weeks after birth, these puppies are essentially just sleeping and nursing.
Yeah, they aren't doing much else.
Right. Their eyes and ears aren't even fully functional. They are basically little sensory-deprived potatoes relying entirely on the mother for thermal regulation and calories.
Little potatoes is a good way to put it. They are essentially still in a gestational state, just outside the womb.
Wow, yeah.
But then a really dramatic neurological shift happens right around week 3. The sensory organs come online, the brain suddenly powers up, and the puppy begins, aggressively mapping the physical and social mechanics of the world.
Which brings us to the critical socialization period.
Yes, the big one.
The documentation states this window occurs strictly between 3 and 12 weeks of age.
Right.
And considering most labs go to their new homes around 8 weeks old, that means by the time you put that puppy in your car for the first time, you are already entering the final countdown of this developmental phase.
Yeah, the clock is ticking loud at that point.
Hmm.
From that 8-week mark through about 3 or 4 months, the absolute priority is socialization.
But the source material is very careful to redefine what socialization actually means neurologically.
Which is so important.
Because I think the common interpretation is just dragging your puppy to a crowded dog park, which is actually a terrible idea.
Oh, it's a completely terrible idea. The emphasis is really on low stress, positive exposure to novelty.
You were talking about highly curated introductions, right?
Mhm.
Like people wearing hats, people in heavy uniforms, the tactile difference between a slippery hardwood floor and rough concrete.
Yeah, exactly. And everyday household acoustics, too, like a vacuum cleaner or, calm, vaccinated adult dogs.
So here's where it gets really interesting. Think of it less like throwing them into the deep end of a busy city to figure it out, and more like curated, manageable introductions so they learn the world is safe.
What's fascinating here is the underlying mechanism of why this specific window exists in the first place. Neurologically, the puppy's brain is rapidly producing synapses, connections between neurons, at a rate it literally never will again.
It's just building a massive associative database.
Exactly. But after 12 to 16 weeks, the brain begins a process called synaptic pruning. It starts cutting away connections that aren't being used just to make the brain more efficient.
So wait, if the brain hasn't encountered a person in a wheelchair, or the sound of a siren, or a slippery tile floor by the time that pruning phase starts?
The puppy doesn't just view those things as new later in life. They view them as existential threats.
Wow. So the default response to the unknown after that window closes is just fear.
Yes, fear. By providing these curated exposures early, you are physically wiring the neural pathways that tell the amygdala, which is the brain's fear center, that novelty is safe and manageable.
Right, so it's almost like sensory inoculation.
That's a perfect term for it.
You are giving the nervous system a microdose of the chaotic world so it can build immunity to stress. The sources call out microexposures specifically.
Yeah, things like gently touching their paws, looking in their ears, or just turning on a pair of electric clippers from across the room.
So you aren't just petting them, you are installing the software that allows them to tolerate a veterinarian or a groomer for the next 14 years without having a panic attack.
Precisely. And that concept of sensory inoculation explains the source's strict warning against flooding.
Sledding.
Yeah, flooding is the outdated practice of overwhelming a puppy's senses with intense stimuli, kind of hoping they'll eventually just give up and get used to it.
Ah, like taking a 10-week-old puppy to a loud, chaotic street festival.
Exactly. Biologically, flooding triggers a massive spike in cortisol.
So they're just stressed out of their minds.
Right. The puppy might actually shut down and appear calm on the outside, but internally, their nervous system is in a state of learned helplessness.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, you aren't teaching them that the world is safe. You are hardwiring a traumatic association into that rapidly developing brain.
You are literally writing bad code.
Yes, exactly.
But, a brilliantly wired, confident software system is pretty useless if you put it into a fragile, broken chassis.
That's a great point.
A confident mind needs a structurally sound physical frame to carry it through the world. And because Labrador Retrievers are a large breed, the timeline for their physical development is drastically different than their neurological timeline.
Oh, totally different. The brain's critical window might close at 4 months, but a large breed's skeleton is actively under construction for up to 12 to 18 months.
That 18-month metric usually shocks people.
Yeah, people don't realize it takes that long.
The sources point out that the bones and joints are still developing well into their second year. I want to drill down on the biology of this because it completely changes how you manage their daily life. We were talking about growth plates, right?
Yes, the epiphyseal plates.
Mm-hmm.
In a growing puppy, the ends of their long bones aren't solid bone yet.
Oh, okay.
They are these soft, really vulnerable areas of dividing cartilage where new bone tissue is actively being created. And because it's soft tissue, it is incredibly susceptible to traumatic injury or repetitive microtrauma.
Which explains the highly specific guidelines for exercise in the documentation. It dictates short, controlled bursts of activity.
Right. Things like swimming, gentle play, or just free roaming in a safe, fenced yard.
But here is where I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
The source has a strict prohibition against structured, repetitive, high-impact, stress-like jogging on pavement or repeated jumping until those growth plates close.
Yes, very strict.
But labs have legendary stamina and massive internal motors. If an owner can't take their hyperactive 6-month-old lab for a 3-mile run to exhaust them, that dog is going to completely dismantle the living room sofa.
I hear that all the time. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the physics of what a forced run actually does to them.
Okay, lay it on me.
When a puppy is free roaming in a backyard, they sprint, they tumble. But the second they feel fatigue or a twinge in a joint, they inherently self-regulate.
Oh, right. They'll just drop under a tree and chew on a stick.
Exactly. But on a leash jog, they can't self-regulate. They are forced to keep your pace.
And they will because they just want to please you.
Right. And the physics of a sustained jog on asphalt means you are repeatedly driving shock waves up through those soft, vulnerable plates of cartilage. Yeah, the microtrauma accumulates. You might successfully tire out the puppy for the afternoon, but you are dramatically increasing the risk of early onset osteoarthritis or elbow dysplasia just a few years down the line.
Wow. So you are trading temporary peace and quiet today for chronic joint disease tomorrow.
Basically, yes.
So if we are intentionally restricting their physical exhaustion to protect their structural frame, we have to find another way to bleed off that immense daily energy indoors. We can't just run them into the ground.
No, we definitely can't.
Which brings us directly to the daily rhythm of managing a young lab, starting with how we train them.
And the sources are unequivocal on this. The methodology of training matters just as much as the training itself. The mandate is entirely focused on positive reinforcement.
And assuming our listeners understand the basics of positive reinforcement, praising and rewarding desired behaviors, the fascinating part is the neurology of why it works so much faster than older intimidation-based methods.
Oh, the science on this is super clear.
The source explicitly calls out the need to abandon dominance theory, alpha rolling, or physical punishment.
Yes, because intimidation fundamentally blocks the learning process. When you use fear or pain to train a dog, you activate the amygdala, which, as we mentioned, floods the brain with stress hormones.
And they can't learn like that.
Nope. In that state of high stress, the brain's higher-order cognitive functions, the areas responsible for complex learning and memory retention, are essentially bypassed.
So the puppy isn't actually learning the command, they're just scrambling to avoid the threat.
Exactly. Whereas positive reinforcement triggers the release of dopamine.
And dopamine is the good stuff.
Right. Dopamine acts like a save button for the brain. When a puppy performs a behavior, gets a reward, and feels a dopamine hit, the neural pathway for that specific behavior physically thickens.
Oh, that's cool. So they learn the code faster and the retention is permanent.
Yes, which ties perfectly into the power of routine mentioned in the texts. Puppies are basically pattern recognition machines.
Right. The documents suggest building a rock-solid, predictable daily routine, like taking them for a potty break the second they wake up, immediately after a meal, and right after a play session.
Yeah, you aren't just hoping for the best. You are engineering situations where they are guaranteed to succeed so you can trigger that dopamine response.
And routine also lowers their baseline anxiety, right?
Absolutely. When they know exactly what happens next in their day, they don't have to exist in a state of hypervigilance.
Part of that routine often relies heavily on crate training, but again, the intention is everything here.
Yes, the crate has to be used correctly.
The source insists a crate must be established as a positive, den-like safe space, complete with comfortable bedding and safe chew toys.
Using a crate as a timeout for bad behavior completely corrupts the tool. If the crate is associated with your anger or their isolation, it stops being a restorative den and basically becomes a prison.
Okay, we have to address the most notoriously frustrating aspect of raising a young lab, the mouthiness.
Oh boy, here are the shark teeth.
Right. Those needle-sharp puppy teeth constantly grabbing at hands, ankles, and clothing. The documentation frames bite inhibition as a non-negotiable part of their early education, but stresses that this is not aggression.
No, it is entirely exploratory.
So what does this all mean? The best way to visualize this mechanism is to think about a human infant.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, a human baby explores the physics, the textures, and the boundaries of their environment by grabbing things with their hands. They touch everything.
Right, they put everything in their mouths too sometimes.
Exactly. A puppy obviously doesn't have hands. Their mouth is their primary sensory apparatus for interacting with the physical world. It is an exploration tool, not a weapon.
It's such a crucial distinction. In a litter, puppies constantly bite each other during play. When one bites too hard, the victim yelps and stops playing.
And that's how they learn.
Yeah, that is how they begin to learn the limits of pressure. They learn that biting too hard ends the fun.
But the source notes that this education has to seamlessly transfer to the human owner. You are supposed to constantly redirect those sharp teeth to appropriate toys.
Yes, constantly.
And if the biting crosses a pressure threshold, you calmly fold your arms and walk away. You end the interaction entirely.
It requires an unbelievable amount of consistency from the human. But you are teaching them an essential skill, which is jaw control.
Right.
A dog that learns soft mouth bite inhibition as a puppy is significantly less likely to cause a serious puncture wound if they are ever startled or injured as an adult.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Now, balancing the socialization protocols, the curated exercise, the constant positive reinforcement, and the bite redirection, I mean, it is an exhausting schedule.
It is a full-time job.
But the mechanism that allows the puppy to actually survive and adapt to all of this data is astonishing. The source material states that puppies require 18 to 20 hours of sleep per day.
I know, it sounds absurd until you look at the biological demands being placed on their system.
Right, because earlier we established that they are physically building bone and tissue at a massive rate, which obviously requires immense cellular energy.
But the neurological demand is even higher.
Really?
Yeah. Neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, primarily happens during sleep.
Oh, wow.
Throughout the day, the puppy is taking in a torrential amount of new stimuli, the texture of a rug, the smell of a new dog, the mechanics of a sit command. All of that is temporarily stored in short-term memory.
And sleep is the process where the brain transfers that data from short-term memory into permanent behavioral code.
Exactly. It's quite literally a massive daily data download.
So without those 18 to 20 hours of sleep, the brain cannot physically process the data.
No, it can't. A sleep-deprived puppy isn't just cranky, their learning retention plummets, and their bite inhibition usually completely falls apart because they just lack the cognitive bandwidth for impulse control.
Which is a brilliant piece of insight from the source. If your puppy acts overly lethargic and sleeps heavily after a simple trip to a friend's house, They aren't physically exhausted.
Sure.
Their brain has just shut down the physical chassis so it can process a gigabyte of new sensory data.
Fatigue is neurological, not muscular.
That's wild. But all that intense cellular growth and neurological processing takes a massive metabolic toll, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The energy required to build a brain and a skeleton leaves their immune system with pretty limited resources, which makes them highly vulnerable and brings us to the final major section of the deep dive, the health dashboard.
And managing a puppy's health requires a really proactive partnership with a licensed veterinarian. This is not the time for internet diagnostics.
Yeah, don't trust Dr. Google for this.
Exactly.
The sources lean heavily into routine exams, tracking growth curves, and tailoring vaccination schedules. But the nuance around parasite prevention is particularly interesting to me. It's not a one-size-fits-all protocol.
No, it really isn't.
The source points out that parasite prevention, fleas, ticks, intestinal worms, heartworm, must be highly individualized to your specific local environment.
Because the biological threats are entirely geographical. A puppy living in a humid, heavily wooded area faces a constant barrage of tick-borne pathogens like Lyme disease, requiring specific topical or oral preventatives.
Right.
But a puppy in a dense urban environment might have a lower tick risk, but a significantly higher risk of contracting intestinal parasites from contaminated soil in high-traffic dog parks.
Or mosquito-borne heartworm in the south. The vet is the only one who actually knows the local epidemiological data.
Precisely. Rely on the local experts.
The documentation also briefly but firmly flags early dental care. Again, going back to microexposures, getting them used to having their lips lifted and teeth touched early means you can actively prevent periodontal disease later without it becoming a wrestling match.
And periodontal disease isn't just about bad breath. The bacteria in the mouth enters the bloodstream and damages the heart and kidneys over time.
It's serious stuff. But the most specific health warning for Labradors in the text surrounds weight monitoring. Labs are famously overwhelmingly food motivated.
There are bottomless pits. They possess a genetic mutation that essentially prevents their brain from registering that they are full.
Wait, really? A genetic mutation?
Yeah, they will literally eat until they make themselves sick.
Which means portion control is entirely on the owner. And because they stare at you with those starving eyes, it is incredibly easy to let portion sizes slowly creep up. An extra handful of kibble, a few pieces of cheese during training.
And the mechanism of why this is so dangerous goes right back to what we discussed about growth plates.
Right.
A puppy's skeleton is soft. If you allow rapid weight gain, you are placing an enormous mechanical load on cartilage that just isn't ready to bear it.
So the soft frame literally bows under the excess weight.
Yes, it causes irreversible structural deviations. Keeping a lab puppy lean, where you can easily feel their ribs without pressing hard, is one of the most effective ways to prevent joint dysplasia.
That's such an important tip. But dealing with a creature that is growing this fast, sleeping this much, and occasionally eating random things off the ground leads to a major psychological hurdle for the owner.
The anxiety is real.
How do you avoid becoming a complete hypochondriac? I feel like I'd panic at every little stumble or missed meal. How do you actually draw the line?
This raises an important question. The source provides a vital framework for distinguishing between transient puppy weirdness and actual medical red flags.
Okay, good. We need that.
It comes down to understanding their baseline metabolic rate.
So let's deduce this. Because a puppy's metabolism is running incredibly hot to fuel all this growth, a normal quirk is probably something minor that doesn't disrupt that underlying engine, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like a clumsy stumble, teething pain, or a random loose stool from eating a weird leaf.
Correct. Those are isolated incidents that resolve quickly. The overarching red flag metric in the documentation is the word persistent.
Okay, persistent. So a red flag is something that actively crashes that high-speed metabolism over time.
Exactly. Persistent lethargy is a prime example. A puppy sleeping after a big day is normal, but a puppy that refuses to engage, play, or track movement for an extended period means their biological battery is being drained by a systemic infection or illness, not just data processing.
That makes a lot of sense. The same logic applies to appetite loss, I imagine. A lab that skips one meal might just have an upset stomach, but a lab that refuses food for 24 hours is experiencing a major physiological disruption.
Unresolved limping is another one. A clumsy trip is fine. A limp that persists for 2 days indicates active trauma to those vulnerable growth plates or joints.
Right.
The mandate is really clear. When symptoms persist and disrupt their baseline energy or mechanics, You don't wait and see, you get a professional evaluation.
Because their fast metabolism means they can crash exponentially faster than an adult dog.
Exactly. You don't want to risk it.
So, looking at the entire landscape of this source material, the careful neurological socialization, the strict protection of the physical frame, the dopamine-driven training, the metabolic demands, it really all distills down to one core concept: balance.
The entire process is a delicate biological balancing act.
It's balancing sensory exposure to the world with the deep, restorative sleep their brain requires to process it. Balancing predictable daily structure with the freedom to play and explore.
Yeah, and balancing physical activity to drain their energy with absolute protection of their developing joints.
And balancing their growing independence with clear, positive guidance. When you execute that balance correctly, you lay a foundation of health and behavioral confidence that pays dividends for the next decade.
You are intentionally engineering a resilient companion.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. We just spent a significant amount of time analyzing how the environment you curate, the routines you strictly enforce, and the positive reinforcements you provide all work together to fundamentally wire this young animal's developing brain.
Right. You are writing their operating system.
You are shaping their entire perception of reality. But think about the reverse for a
Oh,
second.
this is an interesting angle.
Think about the mechanics of what it takes for a human to do that properly. You have to adopt a daily routine of extreme patience. You are forced to learn an entirely nonverbal language of physical communication.
That's so true.
You develop a hyper-awareness of another living creature's minute-to-minute needs, constantly scanning their body language, predicting their behavior, and analyzing the environment for potential stressors.
The level of empathy required is just immense.
So the real question is, while you're doing all of this carefully curated work to wire your puppy's brain over those critical first few months, how does adopting those intense habits of empathy, rigid routine, and profound patience end up rewiring your brain and your habits as a human?
That is a fascinating thought.
You thought you were just installing an operating system in this blank piece of hardware, but it turns out the hardware is upgrading your system at the exact same time. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this extracted blueprint helps you navigate those chaotic, vital early months. We will catch you next time.